I woke up to the sound of laughter, music, and the unmistakable scent of fresh flowers. Which was odd, because I hadn't planned a party. I blinked a few times and rubbed my eyes before looking out the window. What I saw left me speechless. My yard, my private property, the land I had worked hard to maintain, had somehow been transformed overnight into a full-blown wedding venue. Rows of pristine white chairs lined the lawn, all facing a beautifully decorated floral arch. A catering station had been set up near my barn, with chefs in spotless white uniforms bustling around, preparing hors d'oeuvres. A string quartet played soft classical music by the pond. And at the center of it all, barking out orders like some kind of royal event coordinator, stood none other than Karen, the HOA president. The same woman who seemed to believe that my land fell under her domain. I stormed outside, boots crunching on gravel, heart pounding with a mix of confusion and rage. This had to be a mistake, right? Maybe the event planner got the location wrong. But as I got closer, I spotted a massive banner hanging above the setup, "Welcome to the wedding of Sophia and James." Two names I'd never heard before. That's when I realized, it wasn't a mistake. It was pure, unfiltered entitlement. Karen turned just as I reached the front row of chairs. Her face lit up with a fake, overly cheerful smile. "Oh, good morning, Jake," she chirped, waving a clipboard like she was doing me a favor. "Isn't it just gorgeous? The community is going to love this." I stared at her in disbelief. "Karen, what the hell is going on?" She laughed. A light, airy laugh that only made my fists clench tighter. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It's just a small wedding. We needed the perfect outdoor venue, and honestly, your yard was the best option. You should feel honored. The bride's family is very prestigious, you know." I took a deep breath, doing my best to stay calm. "Karen, this is my land. You can't just throw a wedding here without asking me." She rolled her eyes like I was being unreasonable. "Oh, come on. It's for the good of the community. Besides, we tried calling you, but you never answered." "That's because you never called," I snapped. "You can't just show up and host an event on someone else's private property." Karen flipped through her clipboard like it contained some kind of magic permission slip. "The HOA guidelines allow for community events in appropriate locations." I crossed my arms. "And for the 100th time, I'm not part of the HOA." She waved her hand dismissively. "Technicalities. You live here, don't you? That means you should contribute to the community. It's just one day, stop making a fuss." Before I could respond, the bride and groom approached, all smiles. The bride, with perfectly styled blonde hair, beamed. "Oh, you must be Jake. Thank you so much for letting us use your yard, it's absolutely breathtaking." "I didn't let you use anything," I said through gritted teeth. "Karen set this up without asking me." The groom, a smug guy in an overpriced suit, chuckled. "Come on, man. No harm, no foul, right? It's just one day. Besides, we've already paid for everything and the guests are on their way." I ran a hand down my face, patience wearing thin. "You paid? Who?" Karen's voice cut in like nails on a chalkboard. "To the HOA, of course. A very reasonable fee, if I do say so myself." I stared at her, stunned. She had not only hijacked my land, but had also profited off it, without telling me. My jaw dropped. "Oh, and by the way," she added, flipping another page on her clipboard, "the catering trucks had trouble parking, so we had them use your driveway. Hope that's not a problem." I turned around, and sure enough, my entire driveway was clogged with vans, trucks, and even a limousine. I couldn't get my own truck out if I tried. My blood boiled. I took a step closer and lowered my voice. "Move it. All of it. Now." Karen scoffed. "Jake, don't be unreasonable. The ceremony starts in an hour. Just go inside and relax, it'll all be over soon." "Relax?" My property was being overrun. My driveway was blocked, Karen was making money off my land, and I was just supposed to sit quietly while they threw a party I never agreed to? No. Not happening. She turned away, basking in the attention of the arriving guests, acting like this was her estate. The bride and groom returned to their preparations, blissfully unaware, or maybe just uncaring, about how wrong this all was. I pulled out my phone and dialed my farmhand. "Open the back gate," I said. There was a pause. "All of them?" I looked across the lawn at Karen, who was now laughing with some HOA members. "Every single one." He laughed. "Got it, boss." I slipped the phone back in my pocket and casually walked over to the buffet, helping myself to a shrimp skewer. If they wanted a wedding on my land, they were about to get the full farm experience. The towering wedding cake stood like a centerpiece of elegance, until chaos shattered the illusion. It happened instantly. Guests screamed as cows stampeded through the seating area, knocking over chairs and sending carefully arranged flowers flying through the air. The bride let out a horrified shriek as Diesel, one of the largest cows, plowed straight into the cake, reducing it to a mound of smeared frosting and crumbled layers. The groom barely managed to dodge the impact, but his spotless white suit was already speckled with dirt kicked up by hooves tearing through the grass. Karen's expression cycled rapidly, from confusion, to disbelief, and then to pure, unfiltered rage. She spun toward Jake, voice high and sharp. "What did you do?" Jake calmly wiped his mouth with a napkin, tossing the now empty skewer into the frosting-smeared wreckage left by Diesel. "Ha! Looks like the cows didn't get the wedding invite. Guess they decided to crash the party." Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again like a fish gasping for air. She turned back toward the unfolding disaster. A cluster of elderly guests was scrambling toward the exit, only to be blocked by a lounging cow that had made itself quite comfortable. Another guest was less lucky. He stepped directly into a fresh pile of manure, his pricey shoes instantly destroyed. Then came the goats, smaller, faster, and endlessly mischievous. They bounded through the yard like it was an obstacle course. One of them launched itself onto the gift table, sending wrapped boxes flying in every direction. Another somehow climbed on top of the DJ's sound system, its tiny hooves pounding across the controls, twisting the serene wedding music into a glitchy, high-pitched mess that could only be described as audio punishment. But the finale belonged to the goose. Jake's favorite troublemaker, a large white goose named Sergeant Honkers, surveyed the pandemonium and let out a thunderous, aggressive honk. Then, with wings flapping wide, he charged straight at the groom. The man let out a startled yell as Sergeant Honkers pecked at his legs, flapping and screeching in what could only be called a one-sided turf war. The bride, in a panic, tried to pull the goose away, only to make things worse. Sergeant Honkers doubled down, squawking with renewed fury. Jake leaned casually against the buffet table, watching it all unfold like he was tuning into his favorite TV show. Karen, red-faced and trembling with fury, whipped back around to him. "You did this on purpose. Call them off." Jake shrugged. "They live here. You're the ones trespassing." At this point, the guests were in full-blown retreat. Some climbed onto chairs to avoid hooves. A group of bridesmaids hid behind the catering table, peeking out in horror as a particularly curious goat nibbled at the hems of their dresses. One older gentleman stood off against Sergeant Honkers, waving a cloth napkin like it was a fencing duel. The bride collapsed into tears, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. "My wedding is ruined." The groom, still fending off the goose, shouted, "Who the hell throws a wedding on someone else's property without asking?" Jake raised an eyebrow and looked at Karen. "Excellent question." Realizing just how deep the disaster had gone, Karen tried to salvage the event. "Everyone, please. Remain calm. It's just a minor inconvenience." She didn't get to finish. One of the cows had wandered over to the drink station and, with a single shove, toppled the entire table of champagne glasses. Crystal shattered. Bubbly spilled and mixed into the mud and cake ruins. Jake took a long breath, the scent of karma delicious in the air. Karen snapped. I'm calling the police. Jake clapped his hands slowly. Please do. I'd love to hear how they handle an unauthorized wedding on private property. Karen froze, realizing she had no legal ground to stand on. Her mind was scrambling for an escape hatch. Meanwhile, some guests gave up entirely, rushing for their cars like they were fleeing a horror movie. The bride was still sobbing, clinging to what was left of her bouquet like it could hold her together. The groom, brushing feathers from his shoulders, turned on Karen with a venomous glare. This was your idea, he spat. You told us it was all taken care of. Karen, visibly unraveling, stammered, it was. I mean. This is just, unbelievable. The groom let out a long, tired sigh and turned to Jake. Look, man. I don't know what she told you. But I swear, we had no clue this wasn't legit. If I'd known, we never would have come. Jake studied him for a moment. The guy was still obnoxious, but at least he wasn't as deluded as Karen. He gave a slow nod. The bride, meanwhile, continued sobbing. Karen finally snapped. You ruined my wedding. She shrieked. But it was too late. Karen stood frozen, utterly defeated, as the weight of the disaster came crashing down around her. Jake, meanwhile, stretched his arms like a man who'd just finished a satisfying nap. He strolled over to the buffet, grabbed one last snack from what was left, and said casually, well, I'd say this has been an eventful day. Karen shot him a murderous glare, but deep down, she knew, this was over. And she had lost. The wedding was done. The guests were either gone or desperately trying to clean themselves up. The venue, which Karen had so proudly organized, was now a smoldering battlefield of chaos, farm animals wandering through wreckage, ruined decorations littering the ground, and a complete collapse of her social standing. Jake took one last look at the destruction before casually walking back toward his house. Behind him, Sergeant Honkers let out one final, victorious honk, sending Karen into another round of frantic screeching. Best wedding ever. Karen stood in the middle of it all, her expensive blouse smeared with frosting, hair frizzed from the humidity, her entire reputation hanging by a thread. The once elegant setup was unrecognizable, chairs overturned, decorations trampled, half-eaten food scattered thanks to the cows still munching on whatever they could find. The bride sat sobbing in the dirt, clutching the remains of her veil. The groom paced, muttering curses under his breath. Some guests fled. Others stood in stunned silence, like they'd survived a natural disaster. Jake leaned on a fence post, arms crossed, calmly watching Karen's meltdown. She kept trying to speak, to explain, but her words kept dying in her throat. The HOA board members gathered awkwardly around her, some whispering, others staring at her like they were finally seeing her for who she really was. Then the bride's mother broke the silence. Her voice, sharp and furious, cut through the air. Karen, you told us everything was taken care of. You said this was a real venue. You said the owner had agreed. She shrieked the last word, and several guests winced. Karen's lips quivered. Well, I mean. Jake wasn't using his yard for anything important. So I figured. The bride's father stepped forward, furious. You figured? Do you have any idea how much this wedding cost? We paid the HOA thousands of dollars for this? He gestured to the wreckage. A cow had started chewing on the wedding arch. The gift table was upside down. A goat stood proudly atop the destroyed speaker system, like it had conquered the mountain of Karen's lies. Karen flailed, searching for someone else to blame. Her eyes locked on Jake. This is your fault. You let your animals loose. You sabotaged everything. Jake raised an eyebrow. Really? And who exactly gave you permission to hold a wedding on my land? The HOA members exchanged uncomfortable glances. One of them, a woman with thick glasses, finally stepped up. Karen. You told us Jake had agreed. That's the only reason we approved it. Jake laughed, Dry and cold. Approved? You don't get to approve anything on my property. I'm not part of the HOA, remember? Karen's mouth opened and closed, her world collapsing by the second. The bride, eyes red from crying, glared at her. You lied to us. You lied to everyone. The groom groaned, brushing hay off his sleeves. We're getting our money back. Every single penny. Karen gave a nervous, high-pitched laugh. Well, we'll have to go through the HOA treasury for that. The bride's father stepped in again, angrier than ever. You mean the treasury you control? Karen visibly swallowed. Now it was clear, the HOA had taken money for an event that had zero legal standing. The guests wanted refunds. The board members were backing away. One person muttered something about misuse of funds and removing leadership. It was spiraling. And just when it couldn't get worse, sirens wailed in the distance. The police had arrived. Karen spun around like she'd just been handed a lifeline. Oh, thank God. Officers, arrest him. Arrest Jake. He let his animals loose and ruined everything. 2 officers stepped onto the property, taking in the carnage. One adjusted his cap. The other flipped open a notepad. Whose property is this? Jake raised a hand. Mine. The officer nodded. And you didn't give permission for this event? Nope. Karen screeched, he's lying. He's trying to make me look bad. The officer ignored her. And these folks paid the HOA? Jake nodded. Yep. Paid Karen directly. The officer turned to Karen. So you collected money for an event? On land you don't own? Karen went ghostly pale. She stammered for an excuse, but the bride's father stepped in, phone in hand. We've got the receipts. Karen looked like she might actually pass out. The officers exchanged a look. Ma'am, we're going to need you to come down to the station for questioning. The crowd gasped. Karen's eyes bulged. What? No. This is insane. I didn't do anything wrong. Jake smiled. Tell it to the judge. The officers led a wailing, red-faced Karen to their patrol car. The guests quietly gathered their belongings. The bride gave Jake one final, tearful look. For what it's worth. I'm sorry. Jake nodded. Next time, maybe double-check who owns the venue before cutting a check. She sighed and walked away with her family. The groom followed, still looking like he was rethinking his entire life. The remaining HOA members stood awkwardly, murmuring about an emergency meeting. One older man turned to Jake. We'll be in touch. Jake grinned. Looking forward to it. As the last car left his driveway and the sirens faded into the distance, Jake let out a deep, satisfied breath. Sergeant Honkers strutted past, puffing up proudly. Jake gave him a pat. Good work, soldier. Then he turned and headed back inside, already wondering what ridiculous stunt the HOA might try next. But fate wasn't done. The next morning, Jake expected peace. Instead, his phone buzzed nonstop. When he finally answered, his farmhand sounded amused and a little worried. Boss. You might want to check the front yard. You've got visitors. Jake groaned and got out of bed. Peace and quiet would have to wait. Karen may have suffered public humiliation yesterday, but Jake had underestimated just how deep her delusions ran. The next morning, when he stepped outside, he spotted a city vehicle parked near his fence. 2 men in button-up shirts and slacks stood beside it, hands on hips, surveying his land. And standing right there with them, animatedly waving a thick folder of documents, was none other than Karen. Jake sighed, adjusting his hat as he made his way over. Morning, gentlemen. Something I can help you with? One of the men turned, offering a polite but firm nod. Mr. Jake, we received several complaints regarding violations on your property. We're here to conduct an inspection. Jake nearly rolled his eyes. Complaints from who? The second inspector cleared his throat, glancing at Karen. She, of course, had her best concerned citizen face on. From multiple members of the Homeowners Association, she said sweetly, as if she hadn't been dragged off by police just the day before. You see, she continued, your farm animals are creating disturbances. We've also received reports that your property is being used in ways that violate local zoning regulations. Jake folded his arms. Zoning violations? That's funny. I've owned this land for years without a single issue, until now. Karen sighed dramatically, clutching the folder to her chest. It's not personal, Jake. This is about maintaining the integrity of the community. After yesterday's unfortunate incident, residents expressed concern. Jake shook his head, chuckling. So let me get this straight. You trespass, throw a wedding on my land, get arrested, and now I'm the problem? Karen's face twitched, but she quickly recovered. It's not about the past. It's about moving forward. One inspector coughed uncomfortably. We just need to take a look around, Mr. Jake. If everything's in order, we'll be on our way. Jake considered telling them to leave, but decided against it. He had nothing to hide. In fact, he wanted to see how far Karen was willing to take her petty revenge. He stepped aside. Be my guest. The inspectors got to work, jotting notes, glancing around. Karen followed like a smug little shadow, pointing out the barn, fencing, even the water troughs, as if expecting a smoking gun. But the longer the inspection went on, the more her confidence cracked. Finally, the inspectors returned to Jake, flipping through their notes. Well, Mr. Jake, one said, everything's in compliance. Your land is zoned correctly, the animals are healthy and secure, and there are no violations to report. Karen's smile wobbled. But, what about the safety concerns? That goose attacked someone. Jake grinned. You mean Sergeant Honkers? He doesn't like trespassers. The inspectors exchanged a look. Ma'am, farm animals on farmland aren't a violation. Karen's face reddened. But the noise. The smell. Ma'am, the second inspector said, cutting her off, everything here is legal. If there's nothing else, we'll be going. Jake bit back a laugh as the city vehicle drove away, leaving Karen standing in the dust, fists clenched. You think this is over, she hissed. Jake leaned on his fence. I was hoping it was. She stepped closer, eyes blazing. You humiliated me. Do you know how much that wedding cost? Do you know what I lost because of you? Jake raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. The HOA's turning on you? Karen let out a bitter laugh. Of course they are. They're cowards. The moment things get tough, they always abandon me. Jake shrugged. Well, maybe if you hadn't lied, trespassed, and stolen someone's property, they wouldn't have. Her jaw clenched so hard he thought she might crack a tooth. You think you're untouchable, don't you? Jake sighed. Karen. Go home. But she didn't move. Instead, she took a deep breath and said slowly, you'll regret this. I'll find a way to make you pay. That was it. Jake's patience snapped. Karen. The only reason you're not in jail right now is because I didn't press charges for trespassing and fraud. So if I were you, I'd walk away, and hope I stay generous. For the first time, she faltered. Maybe it was fear. Or maybe it was finally realizing she had lost. Without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed off. Jake's phone buzzed a moment later. A message from one of the HOA members. Emergency HOA meeting tonight. Karen's losing control. Thought you'd like to know. Jake smirked. Things were about to get interesting. That evening, Jake sipped a cold drink on his porch as the sun dipped below the horizon. For the first time in days, the air felt still. Calm. But he knew better, this wasn't over yet. He made his way to the HOA clubhouse. The meeting was already in full swing when he arrived. Tension crackled in the air like static. Karen sat stiffly at the head of the table, gripping the armrests like she was holding on to power itself. Jake leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, enjoying the show. The bald board member stood. Let's address the issue. We all saw the wedding. We all know who was responsible. Karen straightened up. Yes, and we need to talk about Jake's disregard for community. Karen, the man cut her off. Stop. This isn't about Jake. It's about you. A murmur of agreement swept through the room. Karen forced a smile. I did what was best for the community. A woman scoffed. You stole money. Lied about the venue. Nearly got us sued. Karen's jaw clenched. That wedding brought prestige. No, someone said. It brought lawsuits. Jake chuckled under his breath. Karen's empire was crumbling fast. Then a man with glasses spoke. There's been talk of a vote. Karen's eyes widened. A vote? The bald man nodded. To remove you as HOA president. Panic flashed in Karen's eyes. No, you can't. I built this HOA. The woman from earlier snapped back. And you abused it. You fined people for holiday lights, chalk drawings, and mailbox sizes. Now you've cost us thousands. Karen shook her head rapidly. I refuse to step down. You don't have a choice, the bald man said. The vote happens now. Hands went up, one after another. Karen's eyes darted around, searching for support. But she was alone. Her face turned white. It was over. Jake finally stepped forward. Looks like the community made its choice. Karen glared at him. This is your fault. Jake tilted his head. Oh? Did I tell you to lie? To hold an illegal wedding? To take everyone's money? She had no response. The bald man cleared his throat. You have 1 week to vacate your position. Karen stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. Without a word, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Jake let out a low whistle. Well, that was fun. The room exhaled. Relief filled the space like fresh air. As Jake turned to leave, the bald man called out. Jake! He stopped. Thanks for everything. Jake smirked. Don't thank me. Thank my cows. A few days later, an unexpected visitor showed up at Jake's gate. The bride. She looked sheepish. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I had no idea Karen was lying. If I'd known, I never would have come. Jake studied her, then nodded. Fair enough. And the lawsuit? He asked. She winced. Not happening. My dad's suing Karen instead. He's furious. Jake chuckled. Can't say I blame him. She reached into her bag and handed him an envelope. It's for the mess. The least I can do. Jake opened it. A check. He thought about refusing. But then thought about the cleanup. I appreciate it. She smiled. Take care, Jake. As she walked away, Jake looked at the check. It wouldn't undo the chaos, but it was a decent ending. Sergeant Honkers strutted past him, honking like a victory parade. Jake smirked. You and me both, buddy. He turned and headed back toward the house, already wondering how long it would take before the HOA tried something stupid again. Whatever it was, he'd be ready.